You changed your fucking story. That's your new story, right? I'm not asking you that.
That's what I've said all
I'm
night.
not asking you that.
And because they have the
I'm
ability
asking
to
you a
be,
fucking yes or no question.
You can have a moral standard without a God too. There's a lot of atheists who believe in absolute morality, objective morality. None
Yeah,
of
but
this is necessary. None of this, I mean, you can do all that stuff without a God.
can you have objective purpose without God, though?
Of course.
Well, what do you mean by objective
If you
purpose
say you can,
there?
sure, why not?
I mean, even when you believe in God, it's still like a subjective purpose, right? Because you're the subject, giving yourself a certain purpose rather than another purpose.
I don't think us giving ourselves purpose is the same thing as God giving us a purpose.
What
But
purpose
And
did
create.
God give
you're
you?
saying, yeah, but you're saying God gave you a purpose, but you just believe that, right? So that's still something you believe.
When
And
Yeah,
if you
you.
believe
I
that
believe it,
whatever you believe is that
whether or
which
not I
is,
believe I have
a
a purpose,
subjective purpose.
sorry, whether or not I believe I have a purpose, I have a purpose.
Well, you only say that because you believe it.
Well, yeah, I'm saying it
Yeah.
now because I believe it, but when I
Well,
didn't believe it, I mean, I would assume it was still there.
well, in that case, everyone has that purpose, right? Whether they believe it or not. So what's the problem? You don't need to believe.
Yeah, I believe that only makes sense logically if there's a God, if we were created with a purpose. But if we're just
Right. So what's okay? So I'll just say I don't believe there's a God, but if you're telling me there's some objective purpose in life, that's fine. I'll say okay, that's fine. I don't need to worry about it then, do I?
I don't think that's the case, but I
Oh,
mean, if
but
that's
you said everyone has an objective purpose, whether they believe in it or not.
right.
So not believing in it would not deprive you of that objective purpose, right?
Right, but what does that have to do with, like, all right, if
What does that have to do with what?
you
The
so
whole
what are
the
you saying?
whole we started this
Inconsequential?
conversation by saying I need to believe in God to, intuit some kind of objective purpose. But then you said everyone has one. God gave it to everyone. Just like presumably think God gave everybody morals, right? So what's the problem? There's no reason to think, oh, if I don't believe in God, there's no purpose for my life. I can't have morality. By your lights, everyone has purpose in life. Everyone has a morality, right?
Right, but then when it comes to having these conversations about it, the justification part is gonna get a little weird.
Well, I know you can't justify anything you're saying. That's true. But I'm just going to grant it for the sake of this argument.
I mean, that was kind of cheeky. You didn't have to say it like
Well,
that, but all
go
right.
ahead then. Justify that everyone has an objective purpose.
By objective, do you mean like independent of minds?
I
That's a
mean,
good
it's
question.
is independent of what we think or don't think about it.
Is that a yes to the independent of minds or no?
Well, I don't know. It's a weird question because you're saying
Well,
independent of
that's what
minds,
objective
human
means.
mind, God's mind.
Will you
Well,
tell
God
us?
is still a subject,
And a
so
mind, right?
I don't, yeah, I don't know how it's subjective there.
But I don't know. Earlier you said too, like, I don't know if we don't have an objective purpose, why is anything right or wrong? Why would it matter if she lived a life of hedonism
Because it
and
matters to the other
stuff?
people that you're living beside.
What was
If
that?
you decide if you decide that it's just tickety boo to bury an axe in the head of the guy beside you and take his wallet,
Like people do
then
all the
that
time.
creates a much that and everybody did no they
Yeah, they
don't.
do. They
No
do
they
all the
don't.
time.
No they
No,
don't.
so I can't
If they did it
Google
all
right
the
now.
time,
Somebody that's done it.
if they did it all the
They
time,
do all the
you wouldn't
time.
be able to go across the street and get a quart of milk and come back alive.
That's not
So
necessarily.
let me take a shot at that
Now
profile, right?
hang on, one sec, please, before the guy with the really great accent steps in, because I want to hammer this home because this is something that theists lay on us all the time. Okay, that this horrible chaos that would be caused without the nonsense. Okay, utter nonsense. People like to be alive because from what they've seen, the alternative sucks. People like to not be in pain because from what they've felt, the alternative sucks.
Yeah,
When
and
you
people like
combine
to
the,
cause
when you
pain
when you
to others.
combine you,
But sometimes it benefits them.
hello, when you combine those things together, okay, people tend to, when you put them in groups, create a uniform area where the things that they don't like and the things that they do like tend to be worked against and worked for. Okay? So that has nothing to do with God. I can guarantee you, that we decided that we didn't like people burying axes in each other's heads just because, long before any quote unquote God showed up on the picture to codify things. I can guarantee it.
You're saying we decided, but when the people do it, they're deciding they don't care.
Yeah, and then what does the rest of the people do to correct it? They just go, oh, well, I guess we'll do it too. Choppy, choppy. No. They step in and they often revisit terrible consequences upon those who would do such a thing.
But I don't see how adding a God is just not adding one more subjective, just one more opinion. How does it make things objective? I don't get it. Like God is just an agent, just like my Aunt Mary, right? So my Aunt Mary says don't do X, Y, Z. God says don't do A, B, C. How is God different from my
Because you
Aunt
can't
Mary?
appeal to him directly, John.
A lot of different ways.
That's the trick. You
But
can't
what's the
appeal to him directly.
relevant way in which it's
But
different?
that because you can't appeal to him directly, then whatever you are told that he has decided is something that if the rest of society is generally speaking obeying, you have to as well, because you have no access to Aunt Sally, right? If Aunt Sally made a ruling and you thought that was a problem, you could go talk to Aunt Sally. You could
Yeah, but
prove the
even if I
nonsense.
couldn't, right? The question is, why? Because she says don't do X, Y, Z, ought I be in accord with that any more than if God says don't do X, Y, Z?
Well, that's a good question.
I don't see how God. See, if there's some problem of subjectivism, I don't see how God solves that. So I never understand when theists say this. How can there be objective morality on the atheist worldview? Well, if you add God in, like if it's not possible on the atheist worldview, I don't see how adding God in solves the problem. Seems like it's going to be the same problem on either worldview. So if there's a way to do it, right, it's not going to be, if there's a way to have objective morality, it's not going to require a God. God is just one more subject. That's subjective morality.
Right. There's an implicit threat in there. They're saying like you should follow God's opinion because if you
Yeah,
don't, he's
but
going to fuck you up.
that's not saying that it's subjective, right? That's just saying that there's an interest for self-preservation to obey him, right? But that doesn't make it objective, right? God could be an evil
Right.
being and do that, right? An evil being could issue orders and say, if you don't obey my orders, you're going to get fucked, right? And carry that out when you don't obey his orders, right? So the question is, what makes God's orders that ought to be followed, right? Well, if he's a good being and he ought to be followed because he's good, then why couldn't that be true of my Aunt Sally, right?
Well,
and why doesn't that imply an independent standard of the good? I don't get it. Which you could have on atheism.
Part of that, why couldn't that be true of Aunt Sally? I don't think Aunt Sally is the standard of moral goodness.
No. We understand that you don't think that, right? We're asking, why ought we believe that God is the standard rather than my Aunt Sally?
I don't know. It depends on, I guess, who you're asking. I don't know. There's different levels to that question.
You're posing a challenge. You're saying on atheism, as far as you can tell, morality is at best subjective, right? And I'm saying, if that's true, how does adding God make it any less subjective, since God is just one more agent who has an opinion about what ought and ought not be done?
Because it's not just one more agent. It's first off, is the creator and sustainer
No,
of
but
everything
that's
that
what's
is.
called a naturalistic fallacy. You familiar with what that is?
No.
A naturalistic fallacy is the fallacy of deriving an ought from a mere is, right? So it doesn't follow from the fact that something is, I don't know, disposed to be one way, that therefore it ought to be that way. It just doesn't follow. So it doesn't follow from the fact that God is the creator that therefore he's good, right? It's perfectly consistent for there to be a bad creator, right? So you have to appeal to some fact that's normative rather than merely descriptive to explain why God is somebody who ought to be obeyed.
I guess if you want to go into why ought we obey God, I think because obviously I think God is good.
But if you're saying
So
if
hang on,
you're
Jack.
saying
Let me.
God is good, right? Why can't we just say that some other set of propositions about what's right or wrong, or good or evil, are true? Like, I don't see what the obstacle is, right? Why is it that a God is required for there to be true moral propositions? I don't get it.
I don't know. I think it will see that when you ask a question like that to me, I think there's multiple reasons, not
Give
just
the
one.
argument.
All right. So like back to what I was saying before. There's you have actions and there's consequences, right?
That's consistent with
And
an evil God, right?
can you let me finish what I'm saying?
Well, I'm gonna. I don't. I'm just trying to point out that
I'm not finished with what I'm saying,
you
though.
need to cite something
Can you
that's
let
inconsistent
me on my
with an
point?
evil God,
Can I
right?
my point and then you comment on my point that I finished?
Yeah, I'm just trying to avoid you wasting our time by.
Well, you're wasting more time by cutting me
Yeah,
off.
but I'm doing so for a reason, right? I'm saying that I want you to find things that are not consistent with an evil God. Consequences are going to be consistent with an evil God. So you have to find something that's
That's not
inconsistent.
you're not letting me finish what I'm saying. I'm saying there's certain consequences, right? But if somebody does something and we say they should ought not do that or they should do something, um, and sorry, I know I said that weird. They ought not do that or they ought do something. Um, that implies that there's rules. The rules, it doesn't logically to me make sense that they are independent of a mind because it's like why am I obligated to take rules from something that can't think or isn't conscious or I owe no I don't owe anything to. Like, I can't owe something to something that doesn't have a mind, isn't a person, isn't personal. So on that level, there's that. Um,
Yeah, but why would a non-naturalist, realist, or you know some other kind of atheistic moral realist accept that?
I'm sorry, why
Like,
what?
you're not giving an argument to show that the view is false. You're just saying, I don't understand it.
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense.
Does it
If I was to
entail
ask,
some contradiction?
I don't know. I don't know that I'd
I'm
call it
trying
a
to understand, when you
contradiction. Is
say
more.
it doesn't make sense, are you saying that it's what? Inconsistent? It's like what? It it's at variance with the weight of evidence or something like that?
I wouldn't know the philosophical way to address it. I just know to me it doesn't make sense. As far as like
Yeah,
it'd be
but
like
that's just like some kind of appeal to incredulity,
if
right?
if a robot was telling me to do something, why am I obligated to listen to the robot?
Yeah, but I don't understand, why am I obligated to listen to God? Like, I don't see what the difference is in those two cases.
Between something like something without a mind that's just programmed to do whatever it outputs, and between something else that's actually aware and conscious, and you don't see the difference there.
The point is, right, if there are correct moral facts, I don't see what difference it makes who's telling you what they are. If there are moral facts, right? If it's wrong to rape, right? The fact that God agrees doesn't change anything.
I don't know. I wouldn't even. That's not even the way I would, I guess, argue that it's wrong because God agrees that it's wrong. Even though obviously I think God would, but to me it's more uh like a thing, like it's based on his nature. If that makes any sense,
I don't know what you mean by that.
it's based on his nature because he's good.
Yeah, but saying he's good, right, could be said about another individual, right?
Right, depending on what standard you're using.
Yeah, but you're trying to claim, right, that the only possible standard is some being that you have in mind. And I just don't get why it would have to be divine.
Oh, what do you mean by divine? Because when I'm thinking of
Because your
something as being
point was to
in the
say, you were saying that atheists can't have objective morality, right? And I'm not understanding how adding a God changes anything.
because you're removing, how do you put it? There's a foundation above that transcends human opinion, and when you remove that foundation, you're left with a question mark. Is either so then what
But they're
happens is
not, but
what
realists,
happens is,
atheists, realists are not removing it. They're just denying that it has a mental character.
all right, and that's fine. They can do that, but then it's awkward on a few different levels, man.
Awkward in what respect?
And the one I was mentioning before is like it'd be like it's like saying because there's this law of gravity that I'm not allowed to jump because it's weighing down on me, and to jump would be to defy it. Like it doesn't make sense.
What I'm saying is, I don't see how what you're proposing isn't just subjectivism.
Subject in what sense?
Subjectivism is the view that moral facts are mind dependent. So if you're saying that moral facts are dependent upon God, you just seem to be some kind of moral subjectivist,
I don't
right?
know.
And atheists can be moral subjectivists.
To me, there's a difference between God's mind and our mind. Like
What's
God's
the
mind is,
relevant difference?
well, to me, God's mind is more objective than our mind. Our mind is
That's
subjective. It's
that's
very.
just what we're asking you to explain. In virtue of what?
I don't understand. If God's
What does
mind
it
is
mean to
objective,
see? Look, we're understanding subjective as meaning mind dependent. So I don't understand what it means to say that some mind is more objective than another. That just seems to be a contradiction.
no, I wouldn't. Oh, I could see if you're defining subjective as mind dependent, then yeah, I could see how that'd be confusing. But that's not how I was thinking about subjective or objective.
I don't know, what is it then that you're challenging?
I already told you. To me, it does.
I
If
thought that what you were
you
saying was
remove that
that
foundation,
atheist. I thought that what you were saying was that atheist morality was subjective inherently, right? But if subjective just means mind dependent, then God is not going to solve the
well, I
problem.
mean
So
subjective
if
in the
that's
sense
not the objection you're making, I don't know what objection you are making.
it's subjective in the sense that there is no standard above two human minds.
Well, but objective, but moral realists, atheistic moral realists, don't believe that.
Okay, and
Think
then
there is a standard independent of
all right,
minds.
when they argue that, they have to explain why we are obligated to obey this thing that's giving us obligations, but it doesn't have a mind. It doesn't care if we transgress its rules, and it didn't create us with a purpose, and there's no intentionality behind our creation.
But I don't see why any of those things are relevant. That's what
None
I'm
of that
asking you to
matters.
show.
None of that. The traffic laws don't need to have a purpose for you
Look, if I
to be
ask you
driving over
why
anything.
we ought to obey God, it's just going to bottom out in you saying, because God is good, right? And if you say, well, why ought to we be beholden to these normative propositions, right? Their answer is just going to be because they're true. So it doesn't really seem like you're giving a different answer. They're, you're saying that the reason why we should obey God's commands is because God is good, and they're saying the reason why you shouldn't do X is because it's wrong. Now, if you're not satisfied with that, as many people are not, that's fine, but I just don't see how God is adding anything. It just seems like you're giving the same answer. God ought to be obeyed because he's good. Well, moral propositions, we ought to be in accord with moral propositions because they're stating what the good is.
I don't know. One of the things that throws me off about that is like, it's good according to who? Because when you say it's good, are the humans that are deciding to follow that deciding that it's good, or is it actually just good?
You're raising some kind of epistemic issue there, it sounds like. But that's not what we're disputing here, right? You're asking a question like, how is it that we know what the correct moral facts are, right?
I mean, that's like you asking me, how do I know God is the foundation?
But
Why wouldn't I be
I'm
able?
not asking you, how is it that you know that God is good, right? I'm asking, in virtue of what is it the case that God commands ought to be followed? And you're saying because he's good, right? Well, the atheist moral realist could give the same answer, right? Why is it that I should not rape or kill or torture? Because those things are wrong or evil.
So the moral realists, or I'm sorry, did you say realist or absolutist? Would you say they're
Realist.
saying that they're saying is evil because it's evil
They're
outside of
saying
their
it's an
thoughts or opinions?
irreducible fact. It's not explained by anything else. Just like God's goodness is not explained by any fact about God.
Mm, I don't know. I would struggle with that personally because
The point is, it doesn't matter whether you would struggle with it personally, right? If your claim is that you can't have like irreducible moral facts, irreducible categorical moral facts on atheism, but you can on theism, you need to have an argument that establishes that.
no, an atheist can say whatever they want and they can argue that they like. It's just me and what putting the two on the table. And like, well, these rules come
You're
from a
just
mind
looking.
that we're obligated
You're
because
not audible, friend.
we owe the good something. To me, that's
Can't hear you. You're chopping in
good.
and out.
Sorry, can you hear me?
You need to go back a full paragraph because all we're getting is.
I think it's because Jack's mic is also on.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it's
Yeah, it's fine. No, I lost my train of thought. But to me, if I'm looking at these two views on the table, right, and somebody's saying, "All right, we have these moral obligations, but they don't come from a mind," and so first off, I don't see how it could be an obligation because I don't see how something without a mind can tell me I have to do something. I don't see also why I should respect something without a mind. Um, in the sense that like I don't see why I owe it anything, like why I'm obligated to obey something that doesn't think or have a thought or doesn't care ultimately whether I obey it or not.
Yeah, but look,
Seems weird.
they're yeah, they might grant you that it's weird, right? But the point is, they're just going to say you haven't presented a reason why it's not possible, which was your burden to show.
I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily my free will.
Well, then you just
To
need to
me,
withdraw your claim that it's not possible on atheism.
nah, I still don't think it is. Not in a way that makes
I was
really.
asking you for the argument then.
Somebody can argue it. It just it on several different levels is gonna break down and just be really awkward and weird.
Yeah, they could bite the bullet on it being awkward and weird. That doesn't show it's impossible.
Yeah, and that's fine. Um, then they could do that, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, but you just saying that it makes you uncomfortable is a different claim than saying it's like internally consistent. Now, when you say it's like impossible, that's different than saying it's awkward or weird or you're not comfortable. Listening to the robot, which has in its possession all the moral facts, right? But like, is there
So are
some
you are you
impossibility
recanting
there?
your claim? Are you recanting your claim that it's impossible, sir?
No, I still think it's impossible. I just think for me to argue it is I don't know. I would have to sit down and flesh it out. But the way I see it is like, all right. So if me and you had a dartboard in front of us, right? We're throwing darts at the board, and I miss and you hit a bullseye. The reason we're gonna agree that you hitting the bullseye is better than me missing is because there's rules established before that, and we we agreed to these rules. We're playing by these same rules, and it's a standard outside of us. Now, to me, just saying that standard exists outside of us, but there's nobody decided it, it doesn't make sense. It seems like
So,
there's a hole there, there's
so
a gap.
Rafael, don't you think you should um, not conclude then if you don't have an argument until you have an
Yeah,
argument?
I mean
You
the
should.
point is just that you're not justified in the claim that you think it's impossible to have, morality or whatever under atheism and all the other things that you're claiming. Right? It's just like at the present you saying that it's impossible. Well, you're just not justified in that. And if you are, then we're just going to ask you what the impossibility is, but you don't have one, so you're saying, in one sense, you do have the impossibility, and another sense, you don't, and that's just a contradiction.
Well, no, I'm saying to me,
Yeah, I mean,
um,
I get it. It
rules,
doesn't make sense to
rules,
you, right? But
no, no,
it
no.
doesn't mean that you have an
Rules,
impossibility.
rules come from a rule giver. When you take the
That's
rule,
just
rule
begging the
giver,
question against the other view.
yeah, I don't know. To me, when you take the rule giver out of the equation, it falls apart. Like there's just
Yeah,
rules,
but
and
so
nobody said these rules,
here
but they're
when you
just there.
say it falls apart, what are you saying other than it feels awkward, it doesn't make you feel good, it makes you uncomfortable, you don't like it? Are you saying something else?
No, I'm saying it rules from something without a mind. How could there be obligations to them? Like why?
That's just an appeal to incredulity.
That's like, well, no, that's like, let me put it this way. Let's say I picked up a rule book, right? And the book that I pick up tells me to kill myself. Why would I be obligated to listen to that book and kill myself?
But I don't get it. Anybody can issue an obligation, right? I'm sorry, anybody can issue a command, and the command doesn't necessarily obligate us. So it's got to be something more than that there's a command that obligates us, right? Which it just seems to indicate that on your own reasoning, it's not actually the fact that something is a command that it's obligating. Some other fact.
No, yeah, you're right. More to it than there just being a command. But that's like if I was walking along the beach, right? And the waves somehow made a pattern in the sand that made it look like it said to shoot myself in the head. Why am I obligated to obey this random occurrence of, I don't know, this random,
Yeah, but that same question arises for the sake of a command.
I don't follow.
Look, the fact that something is a command doesn't in its, which is to say some proposition that, something that's uttered by an agent, right, doesn't in itself obligate somebody to be in accord with it, right? So there's some other thing that explains why you ought to be in accord with it.
I'm sorry, there's something else that explains why I ought
Be
to
in
what?
accord with the command.
Yeah, because it's good, not because it was. I don't know how to explain it. Like it's
Fantastic, but you don't need God for good. That's what Jack is trying to tell you. He's been trying to tell it to you now for about 10 minutes. Do you understand? You don't need God for good.
nah. See, to me, you're separating two different issues now. You're trying to. On the one hand, we should follow God because obviously He's good, but that's when I'm talking about commands coming from a mind or not a mind. That's a whole separate issue.
Do you think that propositions can be true even if there are no minds?
No, because I think ultimately they have to fall on God's mind.
Why?
Because propositions just seem like products of a
Look,
mind to me.
it's an argument as to why propositions don't require God's mind, right? The non-existence of God doesn't entail a contradiction, right?
I don't even understand the question. The non-existence of God doesn't entail a contradiction?
Yeah. You don't understand what that means?
You're saying God doesn't exist, that wouldn't be a contradiction?
That's right, it wouldn't be a contradiction. It might be false, but it wouldn't be a contradiction.
You're breaking up.
Yeah, I said it doesn't register to me as a coherent thought because I can't.
Look,
To me,
if
God.
you're saying it's a contradiction, you need to show if you're saying that it entails a contradiction, you need to show how it entails a contradiction.
I just said propositions to me seem like products of a mind.
No, I didn't say anything about propositions. I'm asking, right, if it's the case that God does not exist, how does it follow that that proposition being true entails a contradiction?
Because that proposition is dependent on a mind. And I feel like in order for that proposition to exist, God would have to
Look,
exist.
here's another way to understand the problem, right? If it were the case that God's existence was logically necessary, it would follow from the axioms of logic. But that would mean that you could demonstrate from the axioms of logic alone that God exists.
I think logic does depend on God. I gotta go, but I would look up the Lord of Non-Contradiction, and I don't know, maybe later on if I get on, we could talk about it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Take care. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Hey, Haiti.
Hello.
Before
Yeah, so I want to respond.